As I crossed this crumbling bridge over the River on Exmoor, I saw a dipper searching along the water's edge. I had not seen a dipper for a number of years until that day. I quickly established it was one of a pair who were constantly searching the water's margins. They would fly to below a bridge with mouthfuls of grubs. I noticed they had built a nest into a hole on the bridge arch. They were busy feeding young chicks. Over the next few days I filmed the comings and goings of this pair in the hope of filming the young as they fledged. I had heard that dipper chicks usually fell like a stone from the nest, dropping into the river below when fledging. It's this behaviour I wanted to film. I arrived early one morning to find the chicks had already fledged. I found them a short distance downstream. Mum and Dad were frantically trying to keep up with their demand for food. Somewhat annoyed with myself with missing filming the fledge, I there and then made it my challenge to do just that. In fact, I would become obsessed with trying to film it. Two years later, Pat and I based ourselves at the Caravan and Motorhome Club site, Pandy, South Wales. Running close to this site are the rivers Hondy and Monnow, and on these rivers are dippers, and even a pair nesting under the bridge next to the site. Although I managed to film this pair, the nest was unfortunately predated and abandoned. A day or so later and further downstream I again found them, gathering nesting materials. As hard as I searched, I could not find the new nest site before it was time for us to leave for home. I did, however, learn from the site warden about a lady, Steph Tyler, affectionately known locally as the Dipper Lady. Dr Stephanie Tyler, along with the many helpers, have been monitoring and recording the dippers along this river and nearby rivers for 40 years. At the time of hearing about her, not appreciating how important she would become in helping me to film a fledge.
Oh, like a rocket.
March 2 years later, we again based ourselves at the Pandy Caravan Club site, with its lovely views towards the Skirrid and the Black Mountains. Armed with information given to me during my conversations with Steph, our filming then started in earnest. As well as the dippers that we had come to film, the rivers here and their banks and surrounds are the home to an abundance of fauna and flora, especially where the rivers Hondy and Monnow meet. Downstream on the Monnow, just below where the Hondy joins it, I found a pair of kingfishers nesting. Watching from the bank and some distance downstream of the nest, the adults would fly towards me, dipping into the river to clean their bills after feeding their young. I hoped it would not be long before their young fledged. It did not take long to find a dipper, as one flew upstream past me, I was sure the nest was not too far away. A wander upstream brought me to a footbridge. I found a dipper sitting patiently in the middle of the river. After a few minutes it flew to the base of one of the bridge supports before flying up to the nest under the bridge, very quickly re-emerging with some nesting material in its bill. It was clearing out the nest for the next brood. I missed the fledge. Tracing my steps back downstream, I soon found its partner. On the opposite bank was one of its fledglings waiting to be fed. The adult then began a thorough search of the margins, collecting a variety of insects and grubs. Once its bill was full, it then washed its bounty before flying across the river to feed it. The chick quickly and greedily took the food, but one small morsel took longer to swallow. It was a busy and exhausting time for the parents trying to keep up with a constant food supply for this demanding chick. 2 days later, I found the kingfisher had also fledged, one having already learnt the art of fishing. A tadpole on this occasion, that it then proceeded to dispatch in the same way as an adult would deal with a fish. It never ceases to amaze me how quickly kingfisher chicks learn this fishing skill. Eventually managing to swallow the tadpole before flying off to join its 3 siblings. By now Steph had located a nest with young in upstream under another road bridge. She refers to them as the bridge cottage pair. For me to film them, I needed permission from the landowners whose river bank the bridge passes over. With permission granted, I had to then decide the best location to film from. The young were well developed and were already peering out of the nest. The nest was located on the inside of one of the bridge support girders that made it difficult for me to film its entrance. Although I was very careful filming the nest entrance, I decided not to continue filming under the bridge, as I did not want to cause the chicks or parents any unnecessary disturbance. The chicks were over 2 weeks old and of an age where it has been known for them to explode, that is, jump from the nest if disturbed. Food must have been plentiful this year, as the adults did not venture far from the nest in search of it. A rock in the middle of the river, just upstream from the nest, was a favourite diving point. Diving into the river to search for food, they would then swim to the bank afterwards to remove the hard shells from the caddisfly larvae. Using a favoured stone as an anvil and deploying a similar method to the thrushes when breaking open snail shells, they would hit the caddisfly larva against the stone to remove its casing. Feeding the young in the nest was now a full-time job. The breeding season was now well and truly underway. fledging must be imminent. I was ready to film when it happened, capturing the chick dropping some 10 feet from under the bridge like a stone into the middle of the river. It paddled like a whirling dervish, at first holding station where it had landed in the water, and as if gaining some invisible traction, shot towards the bank at some speed. It had taken me 5 years since missing that fledge on Exmoor to film a chick fledging, but I succeeded. The chick was now eager to explore its new surroundings, having been cooped up in the nest with its siblings for 23 days. First of all, giving itself a good wash and shakedown. Initially both adults fed this chick, as well as the others that had fledged just before sunrise. It was easy to tell the parents apart. The adults at this site had been caught and ringed by Steph earlier in the year. I had noticed earlier one of the adults did not have a ring. A check through my binoculars showed the other parent's ring number to include a 7. A quick inquiry with Steph revealed only the male had a 7 in its ring number. I can only assume that the original female in this territory had either been displaced or predated. Unless handling the birds, it is very difficult to tell the difference between adult males and females. Females are slightly smaller in size. With all of the chicks now out of the nest, and the others having fledged before sunrise, you would have thought both parents would be totally occupied feeding them. In fact, this was initially the case, but I soon noticed the male was doing less of the work. Within an hour of the last chick fledging, I found him already softening leaves ready to reline the nest for the next brood. I noticed this also happened with the pair by the small footbridge. The riverbanks are also good places to find other bird species that are also well into their breeding season. Some of them are migrants that only travel here to breed. The well-being of our river systems playing an important role in this process. It's only through careful observations of the successes and failures of creatures that use this environment can we quickly learn when things are going wrong and hopefully rectify the situation. It's a busy time of the year for Dr Steph Tyler, her friend Fliss and their group of birdringers. We dip and nest sites approximately every 600 metres that need checking every 2 weeks or so. Dippers use a variety of places to build their nests, not always in the easiest of locations to find and check. Further upstream on the River Hondy there is a lovely if somewhat dilapidated pack horse style bridge, known locally as the Devil's Bridge. Dippers here tend to nest in holes where the stones are missing from the bridge. On this occasion the nest was unused. From the end of March to early June, Steph and her helpers will be out nest checking to get all that important data that we rely upon to understand how well our fauna and flora is coping with all the pressures put upon it. On occasions, even someone as experienced as Steph can have a mishap. You alright, Steph?
Okay. Okay, don't worry.
Although I've been filming otters for a number of years, I've yet to see one on these rivers, although I know they have often been sighted. I know they are present on the Hondi by the number of spraints I find, as well as other signs. Pond, close to the river, was one such site. Otters are known to be partial to toads and frogs that are an easy source of food for them when they return to where they were born to spawn. In this pond the otter would appear to have found a banquet. The back legs must be a delicacy, judging by the number I see with just their back end missing. Crossing this bridge enables me to have uninterrupted views of another dipper pair who built their nest on the river bank within some exposed stone. One adult is preening, an important activity as it ensures the feathers are properly maintained and well oiled in order for it to swim underwater. As it waits patiently whilst its partner prepares to feed the chicks, you can see how well oiled its back appears. This is as a result of the meticulous attention it gave to them whilst preening. Slow motion footage shows how delicately the adults approach the nest to feed the young. Afterwards, returning to the river to wash their bills before searching for more food. Bill cleaning in the river after feeding is a behaviour I have also witnessed with kingfishers. Dippers tend to have at least 2 broods a year, and on occasions 3. I was therefore lucky to return to Bridge Cottage to watch Steph ring a second brood, with the help of Fliss, on this occasion ringing 4 chicks. The ringing of chicks enables national records to be kept of breeding successes, brood sizes, nest sites, mortality rates, etc. Just as important, the statistics can be used to identify rises and falls in populations, so we can quickly know if there are problems such as river pollutants affecting breeding successes, either nationally or locally. In order for Steph to check and record the food availability in the river, she uses a method called kick sampling. This entails placing a net in the stream, kicking the riverbed upwards in front of it with her boot, then checking what ends up in the net. On this occasion we found mainly mayfly nymphs and freshwater limpets.
Put the head back in and watch it come out again.
It's by keeping meticulous records of breeding successes, failures, nest locations, etc. that we're able to understand what is happening to our fauna and flora.
Oh, these are nice. Those are mayfly nymphs with the three anal cerci, the three prongs at the back. So they're all nice. Good dipper food, those.
We also need to know what is living in the rivers, as all life is interdependent on others. Grey wagtails are one of the many bird species that share the river with the dippers, often nesting in close proximity of each other, as they're doing here. Wagtails in some ways are similar to dippers, inasmuch as they feed on invertebrates. They will also catch flying insects, often fluttering up from a rock in the river to catch them. Below the wagtail's nest there is a ledge where the adult would fly onto before tentatively approaching the nest with food for the young. Unlike dippers, wagtails are much more wary when approaching the nest. Sometimes when close to the nest they nonchalantly look everywhere except at the nest for ages, before taking that final quick flight to feed its young. Luckily, the river here has an abundance of food, as can be seen from the amount the male has gathered in its bill. They would often search for food upstream, then return, perching high before flying down to the nest. Steph tells me the nest failure for grey wagtails is very high, much higher than for dippers. This pair must have been very special, as they successfully fledged 5 chicks. Having now successfully filmed a fledge, but as with all addictions, yes, I've become a dipper addict, I wanted to do better. I wanted to film that moment as they leave the nest in fall. Steph located a new nest for me by a waterfall on the River Olcon, the young due to fledge shortly. The downside was it only had 2 chicks, which limited my chances of getting the chicks in the frame as they fall. But I could see and film the nest entrance from my camera location. The nest was in a beautiful site at the side of a waterfall, affording me good views of the entrance. The adults were constantly feeding the 2 chicks, who appeared large enough to fledge. A couple of mornings later, while still dark, I set up my camera and waited. As the sun rose, I could see the chicks were reaching further out of the nest. I sensed that fledging was imminent. Parents deployed a strategy of standing back, watching, as well as having stopped feeding them. Then, with a lot of encouragement from the adults atop the waterfall, the first chick fell from the nest right in front of me. Landing at the water's edge, and after a refreshing drink, it quickly started to explore its new surroundings. Quickly learning what it could and couldn't eat. The second chick was somewhat reluctant to leave. Mum and Dad at times getting very agitated. Perching next to and even on top of the nest, appearing to start pulling bits off it. Some 2 hours after its sibling fledged, and after a lot of persuasion from one of the adults, now calling from just below the nest entrance, it too fledged. The other adult, who had been watching the proceedings, then flew down to make sure it was okay. Their journey in life outside the nest had just started in earnest. With encouragement from the parents, they precariously swam across the river in front of the waterfall. Although now out of the nest, the constant demand for food continued. With Mum and Dad being so attentive, I have no doubt these two chicks have had a good start in life, and will, with luck, make it into adulthood. I leave happy that I have filmed not one but two chicks fledging, and what's more, with both in the frame. Yeah. As I depart, I can't help wondering what the future has in store for them. I find myself very privileged to have been able to absorb myself into the lives of our only aquatic perching bird. We have a rich biodiversity in the UK that is constantly under threat, but with the help of Dr Steph Tyler, colleagues and many others up and down the country freely giving up their time, there is hope that we can conserve and protect our beautiful fauna and flora for generations to come. A big thank you to you all. Thank you.